Welcome back. India is on a relentless quest to enter the nuclear suppliers group. It hasn't happened so far, but diplomatic efforts are on. New Zealand's Prime Minister, Mr. Key, was recently in India, and the Indian Prime Minister said that New Zealand has promised him that New Zealand will play a constructive role when it comes to India's entry. Now, India is already conducting nuclear commerce, so why is it so important for India to enter this high-profile nuclear commerce group? Precisely for the reason that India's energy needs are increasing and nuclear energy seems to be a cleaner form of energy. India, of course, wants a mixed basket of energy and wants to be in the group that decides the rules of nuclear commerce, that being the NSG, because these rules are quite frequently changing. Let me introduce my panel to you. Surya Gangadharan, Foreign Affairs Analyst, now with WION, continues to stay with us. Thanks very much, sir. We've got Raymond Vickery, somebody who's quite well known in India also for playing quite a crucial role there and tracking that India-United States nuclear deal quite closely. He's written about energy at quite some length as well. And I believe I'm joined by Abhijit Iyer Mitra, somebody who's been quite vocal about NSG efforts or the failed efforts that have been made by the Indian government, as he puts it. We've got Rajji Rajgopalan of think tank ORF. She would be joining us soon. Again, somebody who's known for her expert views on nuclear energy. Let me begin with a report that's been filed by my colleague Ramesh Ramachandran to give our viewers a sense of what is NSG all about and why it's important for India, the efforts that India over years has been making to get into this high-profile group. Have a look at this report.
The Nuclear Suppliers Group, or NSG, was created following the nuclear tests conducted by India in 1974. It is a group of nuclear supplier countries that seeks to contribute to the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons through the implementation of two sets of guidelines for nuclear exports and nuclear-related exports. The NSG guidelines are implemented by the member states in accordance with their national laws and practices. Decisions on export applications are taken at the national level in accordance with national export licensing requirements. There are 48 members in the NSG. The European Commission participates as an observer. South Korea is the current chair of the NSG. Switzerland will take over as the chair next year. In 2008, the Nuclear Suppliers Group made an exception for India, which is not a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT, thus paving the way for its members to engage in civil nuclear cooperation with India. Since then, India has been able to source uranium and reactor technologies from the NSG members, but it is still not a member of the group, which means it cannot frame the rules. It has to live by the rules set for it by the NSG. India says this anomaly needs to go. The Nuclear Suppliers Group is one of 4 export control regimes India is seeking membership of. The other 3 are Missile Technology Control Regime, or MTCR, Wassenaar Arrangement, and the Australia Group. Since the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement with the United States in 2008, India has been trying to become a member of these groups, which regulate the sale and transfer of conventional, nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons and technologies. India applied for the membership of MTCR in 2015. And was admitted as its 35th member in June this year. Indian Foreign Secretary S. Jaishankar signed the document of accession into MTCR at New Delhi in the presence of the ambassadors of France, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. The June 2016 NSG plenary at Seoul in South Korea failed to arrive at a consensus on India's application for membership. The NSG operates by consensus. Therefore, every vote counts, and this is why China matters. Ramesh Ramachandran for WION.
All right, let me go straight to Surya Gangadharan. Surya, just put this in perspective for us. India for years has been fighting to get into NSG, but it continues to conduct nuclear commerce. So while it is important for India to be on the high table of nuclear commerce, because this is the body that's making the rules, how important is it really? Because it seems India has made this a prestige issue.
Well, I think it is a prestige issue. India has aspirations on the world stage, and the sense is that it's about time that a country like ours, with the kind of energy needs that we have and the kind of energy plans that we have, we should be on the nuclear high table. Now, especially more so when many of the NSG members have no stakes in nuclear trade at all. There are no nuclear plants. They have no nuclear plans at all. And why are they deciding the rules when a country like India is far better fitted for that kind of thing?
But they say that India is not a member of NPT, Non-Proliferation
Yeah,
Treaty.
when you look back, the NSG was framed with the idea of keeping countries like India out of nuclear trade. But we have been able to circumvent all those rules. We have built up our own nuclear industry to a point where tomorrow, or maybe in a few years from now, we'll be able to export our own nuclear power plants to Vietnam, to small countries all over the world. And I think that's something that America does not want, which is why the civil nuclear deal came in. And now America also wants us to be in the NSG, because it's far better to monitor a country like India when you're sitting in a group, along with others.
Easier.
And it's easier to monitor you,
Let's go to the American guest, Raymond Vickery. If India and United States could circumvent all of these problems in 2008 and go ahead with the India-US civil nuclear deal, then there is a lot of confusion here in India amongst Indians. They ask, then what is the problem now? If we could prove to the world then in 2008 that India is going to abide by its assurances when it comes to non-proliferation of nuclear know-how, then why is India facing problems in getting into NSG? Raymond Vickery, would you like to weigh in on that?
Absolutely. I want to make it plain that the United States stands foursquare behind India's membership in NSG, just as we did for the missile technology regime, and as we advocate both for the Australia group on chemical weapons and Wassenaar on ordinary weapons. And the reason is because India is a responsible player in the international scene. India is a democracy prescribing and subscribing to the rule of law, both nationally and internationally. And we think that those kinds of values are very important in terms of world leadership, which we encourage very much India.
But Mr. Vickery, I apologize.
Our Secretary of State.
So I wouldn't want to interrupt, but we in India are aware of what United States claim is. But the question really is, why is US also not able to build up the kind of support it did in 2008? I remember in 2008, there was a call made by President Bush to Hu Jintao, and that was the last glitch that was worked out. This time, what's stopping the US from throwing its weight behind India?
The United States is doing everything it can. The one nation which is really objecting is China. China has its own interest in regard to what happens with India, particularly in terms of nuclear matters. So it's not an easy matter just to say, well, as a holdout, you, United States, make China do this. That's not the way it works. We're doing everything we can and working with China and working with India to bring India into the NSG. And it should happen because it's in China's interest as well.
I mean, that's interesting that he says that, because India is a member of MTCR, China isn't. So actually, if the two countries decided, then they could sit down and talk about it. Before we go deeper into that, my colleague Ramesh Ramachandran has also filed a report on the visit of New Zealand's Prime Minister to India, who says that New Zealand would like to play a constructive role. Remember, in South Korea, India's attempt to get into NSG failed. China blocked it, but there were several other countries too. And the perception in India is that New Zealand at that meeting also failed India. Have a look at this report, and then we'll talk about what this constructive role is that New Zealand is talking about.
Time is of the essence as India makes another attempt at becoming a member of the Nuclear Suppliers Group. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has invested in personalized diplomacy and sought to establish a rapport with key world leaders, logging frequent flyer miles along the way and reaching out to friends and frenemies alike. But he has met with moderate success.
I am also thankful to Prime Minister Key for New Zealand's constructive approach to the consideration of India's membership of the Nuclear Supply Group.
For his part, the New Zealand Prime Minister says he looks forward to India becoming an NSG member at the earliest. Significantly for India, he does not mention the words Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty or NPT as a precondition for the membership.
We had a detailed conversation about India's application to become a member of the Nuclear Suppliers Group. I acknowledged the importance to India of it joining the NSG. I also stated that New Zealand would continue to contribute constructively to the process currently underway in the NSG to consider India's membership. New Zealand is committed to working with the NSG members to reach a decision, and as soon as possible.
But India's diplomatic maneuvers have met with stiff opposition from China. China wants a criteria-based approach as opposed to making a country-specific exception. Doing so could enable it to push for the membership of Pakistan, which it sees as an all-weather ally and a counterweight to India. On the margins of the BRICS summit held at Goa earlier this month, President Xi Jinping of China indicated that a second round of talks between the Chinese and Indian nuclear negotiators will be held soon. India's quest for membership of the Nuclear Suppliers Group continues to be in a limbo because of the reluctance or outright opposition of some members to allow India entry into the group that controls global nuclear commerce. Although some countries such as Mexico and to some extent New Zealand have since softened their position, China continues to remain a stumbling block. All eyes are now on the talks between India and China before the next meeting of the Nuclear Suppliers Group in Vienna next month. Ramesh Ramachandran, WION, New Delhi.
All right, so what is this constructive role that's being spoken of here? Is it criteria? Because China constantly throws the rule book to India saying that you haven't signed NPT. Surya, what is the constructive role? Is India now diplomatically working to get the rule book changed?
Well, I would assume that it's basically about rules, you know. And since the rules are formed on the basis of consensus, which is basically driven by the US so many years ago, I believe the rules can be changed. It may be, I'm speculating here, but I would presume this is a kind of a bureaucratic thing which can be done, you know. And I would presume that if there is sufficient support for those little tweaking of rules, the only question is how do you ensure that India gets in, Pakistan stays out, or other proliferators like Pakistan stay out, and that China is along with this in this move. So I think that's where the question marks really are.
Let me go to Abhijit Iyer Mitra before I go to Raymond again. Abhijit, do you think Indian diplomacy is finally working out now that New Zealand says that they will play a constructive role in ensuring India enters the NSG?
Anshul, I'm afraid not actually. Because if you remember, this was the same hullabaloo that was created during the Swiss president's, the meeting that Narendra Modi had with the Swiss president in Bern. And if you remember, Switzerland then went on to oppose us at the meeting in Seoul. The issue here is much, much deeper. When New Zealand says constructive role, we need to understand what constructive is. What these 12 or 14 countries actually want is that the promises we gave during the 2007-2008 waiver process, which was a complete separation of our reactors into military and civilian, will actually happen. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. Between 12 and 14 reactors now are stuck in limbo. You have civilian reactors co-located with military reactors, which makes, well, for want of a nicer word, accidental shifting of civil supplies to the military stream very easy. And this is something they are absolutely determined to not go ahead. Now, your American guest earlier on said that India is an exceptional country, it hasn't broken rules and so on and so forth. I'm afraid these other 14 countries that I spoke to in Vienna were anything but complimentary about India. They see this almost as a deliberate attempt to hoodwink them. They're not happy about it. And if you think China is somehow the core of your problems, I think we'll really have to rethink that big time all over again. So no, I don't think...
Abhijit says China is not the problem and the other nations India won't manage hoodwink.
Well, there are always deeper issues here, and clearly some of the issues, some of the points that India makes publicly, clearly there's a lot of other layers over there that we need to look into closely.
Let me go to Raymond Vickery. Raymond, here in India, the perception is that China is blocking it. But my colleague and friend Abhijit Iyer says that it's not just China. There are a lot of other nations in Vienna who seem to be against it because they think India hasn't sort of delivered on the promises it made in 2008. So it isn't just China that's a problem. I'd like to ask you, what did India do right in 2008 that it could perhaps repeat now in order to get into NSG?
Well, I think that India is doing things right. It is true that the 2008 agreement, which opened up civil nuclear between the United States and India and led to the end of the nuclear apartheid regime that had been in place against India, requires separate military civil nuclear. Now, that hasn't been perfected with India, but India's made good progress. And I think that when you talk about these 12 or 13 others, they're ones who are concerned, yes, that this be followed through on, but they can be talked to, and I believe convinced that, in fact, India is a responsible non-proliferation member of the civil nuclear community. And that's where it really lies. And there ought to be an exception for India because India, one, is not going to sign the NPT to give up its military nuclear capabilities. And nobody thinks that it will, but it has an excellent record in terms of export controls and non-proliferation. That's to be contrasted with a country like Pakistan. A.Q. Khan ran an international bazaar in terms of proliferation of nuclear technology.
So, Mr. Vickery, I'm running out of time. If you'd allow me to interrupt, but it is good to hear these words from you. So then, in that sense, you're saying that India perhaps could rely on America to talk to these 11 or 12 countries that Abhijit is speaking of in order to garner their support. But I'd like to ask you, is it possible to change the rules? So in that sense, the problem that is being quoted could perhaps be worked on. And in that sense, as Surya began the discussion with, is it possible for the rule book to be changed specifically in a manner that India could enter because of its impeccable record and Pakistan not? What's your view?
Yes, of course, that's perfectly possible. Things have to be done by consensus, but rules are not written in stone and not subject to any kind of amendment. And what our argument is, along with India, is that, look, let's look at the realities of this. It is better for China, it's better for the world to have India as a responsible non-proliferation advocate in the system rather than outside. So that's perfectly possible.
All right, let's go to Abhijit Iyer and give him the final word. Completely running out of time here. Abhijit, I'm sorry we couldn't spend much time with you because of the issues with the Skype connection. You're not very happy with the diplomatic efforts India has made. You don't think that's enough, and you think there are this group of countries that want India to deliver on the promises, as you say, India has made. But wouldn't you agree that it's better for India to be a part of NSG than not, and perhaps concerted efforts should be made for India to get into it, even if it requires changing of the rules?
Look, I absolutely agree that Indian membership of the NSG would be very good. The question is, what tangible price does it come at? And right now, the price is too heavy. Those 14 reactors, the cost of bifurcation of your nuclear program is so steep. They are so conjoined. This was a nuclear program that was developed under sanctions. And sanctions programs like this, conjoined military-civilian programs, dual-use programs, developed under sanctions are extremely difficult, extremely expensive. By one estimate, just actually bifurcating this program will cost you between $30 to $32 billion over the next 10 years. Are you willing to spend that as a tangible price of NSG membership? Second point, what the NSG members say, these smaller countries say, is they're actually doing India a favor. That once the price of membership is so high, Pakistan will not want, even if China wants it to be a member, Pakistan will not want to be a member of a club like this that impose such high costs on membership. So, making it sort of that exclusive country club where you've got to pay a few crores for membership fees, and that pretty much only ensures that Bentley owners get in and Mercedes and BMW owners can't get in. It's sort of like that. So I don't see any particular way out of this, except that Mr. Vickery's optimism seems quite at variance with what I've been hearing from these other countries.
All right, Abhijit, I'm going to get Surya completely out of time. A very quick word, because it's now, after hearing Abhijit, it's not all a rosy picture. Maybe it's just too much of a prestige issue. Or do the losses outweigh the benefits?
Well, if the price that Abhijit is mentioning, about $30-odd billion, that's a huge price to pay for membership in the NSG. So, and the other point is, can it be done that easily? If he says that the civil and the military element are so conjoined that separating them is going to cost so much money, is it something we should go for? You know, I mean, there should be some frankness on the part of the government to tell the public what the real issues are here.
So perhaps India is trying to work out a way that it could skirt both of these issues, or if there are more than two. Thanks very much, gentlemen, Abhijit Iyer, for your critical analysis of Indian diplomacy and what's really at play. Raymond Vickery, for your optimism and showing support to India, though it's completely your opinion. And as a South Asian journalist, I must stay unbiased. And Surya, thanks very much for joining us in the studio. That's a wrap from all of us here at Gravitas. Thanks for watching. Good night.